Imagine for a moment you've been texting someone every day. They respond fast, they're always available, and they never miss a beat. You grow used to it, comfortable, predictable. But then one day, silence. No text, no call, no update, and it hits you like a cold wind. Where they go, that right there is scarcity. See, the moment something we're used to disappears, it gains weight in our minds. Its absence becomes a presence. And this, whether we like to admit it or not, is how desire sharpens. Not in the moments of constant availability, but in the moments of withdrawal. When a woman breaks away, when she steps back from a man, something fundamental shifts in the dynamic. She goes from being a certainty to becoming a mystery again. And there's nothing more intoxicating than mystery. When she walks away, not with bitterness, not with rage, but with quiet certainty, she triggers something powerful. A man doesn't consciously think, she's scarce now, so I want her. No, it's deeper than that. He feels it. Her absence isn't just noticed, it's felt. It echoes in the silence of his phone, in the space she once occupied with her presence, her attention, her laughter, her warmth. The human psyche doesn't value what it can predict and control, it values what it can't quite pin down. And when a woman walks away, when she's no longer orbiting around a man's life, she becomes that unpredictable force, that enigma. She breaks the pattern. And patterns, when broken, in that space she leaves behind, the man is forced to contend with something new. Loss, maybe not of the woman herself, yet, but of the version of her he thought he could always count on. The one who answered every message, forgave every slip, stayed through every silence. That version no longer exists. And now he has to look again. Really look. He has to recalibrate, ask himself questions he never considered when she was always there. Was she really who I thought she was? Why did I take her for granted? Why does it bother me so much that she's gone? Desire isn't rooted in comfort, it's born in tension, in the space between what we have and what we fear we can't get back. When a woman reclaims that space by walking away, she steps into her own value. She's no longer handing herself over freely. She's saying, without ever needing to say it aloud, I am not afraid to leave. And that terrifies a man in the best way. Because now she's not reacting. She's not pleading. She's not proving. She's not waiting. She's simply gone. And that kind of silence, that kind of self-respect, that echoes louder than any words could. Let's not mistake this for a game. This isn't about manipulation. This is about gravity. Emotional gravity. When a woman breaks away, she doesn't lose power. She gathers it. She becomes the thing a man must chase, not because she's teasing him, but because she's real. Because she values herself enough to know that staying for less than she deserves is the real loss. Men don't resist women who leave because they enjoy the pain. They resist it because it confronts something primal. It reminds them that love is not ownership, that attention isn't owed, that connection must be earned, again and again. And when it's withdrawn, it shines a blinding light on just how much of it they took for granted. Absence, when laced with dignity, is magnetic. And the woman who understands that doesn't need to shout. She doesn't need to explain. She simply walks. Shoulders back, silence intact, self-worth leading the way. And, in doing so, she becomes unforgettable. Sometimes the most powerful move a woman can make is not to fight, not to argue, not to convince, but to remove herself. To walk away with such poise that the man who once thought he had her now finds himself chasing her shadow, craving her clarity, haunted by the version of her that once stayed longer than she should have. And that's the truth that never fails to ignite desire. She leaves, and suddenly, she's everywhere. Now let's talk about what really happens when a woman detaches. Not just physically, but emotionally. When she truly lets go of the need to be chosen, approved, or pursued. Because this is where the real shift begins. This is where power moves from one hand to another without a single word being exchanged. Most men operate in relationships on a very simple but often unspoken dynamic: control through certainty. As long as they know you'll still be there, that you'll still text back, still forgive, still hope, they feel safe in their grip. It's not always malicious, sometimes it's unconscious, but it's control all the same. And it gives them the illusion that they don't have to show up fully because you always will. But when a woman becomes emotionally detached, when she stops reacting, when she no longer waits for a response or adjusts herself to keep the peace, everything changes. The ground beneath that man begins to shake. Why? Because he can't read her anymore. He can't predict her next move. And that unpredictability, it disarms the entire framework of control he was relying on. He's no longer sure if she cares, no longer certain if she'll stay. And that uncertainty, when it comes from someone who was once emotionally invested, is jarring. It cracks open the comfortable illusion and forces him to actually feel, to question, to wonder, to examine his role, his effort, his absence. See, a woman who detaches is dangerous, not because she wants revenge, but because she no longer wants to participate in a dynamic that costs her peace. Her silence becomes louder than her arguments ever were. Her stillness speaks more than all her explanations. And what men often discover too late is that it's not the yelling, the crying, or the chasing that hurts when she leaves. It's the cold, calm nothingness, the quiet decision she made, long before she physically walked out, to stop needing him emotionally. Because emotional need is a kind of leash. And when that leash is gone, when she's not looking at him with pleading eyes or hopeful smiles anymore, he has to face the one person he's been avoiding in all of this: himself. Without her emotional investment holding the connection together, he's left with a mirror, a raw, honest reflection of how he showed up or didn't. And men aren't used to that. They're used to women explaining, expressing, forgiving. They're used to knowing that no matter how badly they misstep, there will be another chance. But emotional detachment doesn't leave room for that kind of comfort. It's a closed door, not slammed, not locked, just no longer ajar. It simply doesn't invite access anymore. This is why so many men chase harder when a woman stops chasing. Not because they've suddenly become enlightened, but because her detachment disrupts the emotional dynamic they were relying on. They're not just reacting to her distance, they're reacting to the loss of their own perceived power in the connection. They feel it when the texts go unanswered, but they ache when the emotional energy is gone. When her tone shifts from warmth to neutrality, when her eyes no longer seek theirs for answers, when she listens but doesn't lean in, responds but doesn't engage, stays polite but not present. That's when they realize something has been taken away. Not forcibly, not spitefully, just removed. Quietly, gracefully, irreversibly. And in that moment, they're not chasing her. They're chasing the feeling of being wanted, the feeling of being emotionally needed. They're trying to plug back into something they only now realize was sustaining the whole relationship. Her effort, her energy, her heart. The irony is, the moment she detaches is the moment she becomes most powerful in his eyes. Because he can't fix it with charm anymore. He can't smooth it over with promises. Her emotional silence tells him more than any speech could. It tells him that she's done playing small to make him feel big, that her validation is no longer available for rent, that she's no longer in a place where his attention feels like currency because she stopped buying. And that kind of woman, the one who doesn't react, doesn't cling, doesn't flinch when he pulls away, She lingers in his mind long after she's gone. Because she didn't walk out to make a scene, she walked out to find herself. And she did. There is something undeniable about a woman who carries herself with self-respect. You can feel it when she walks into a room. It's not arrogance. It's not defiance. It's a quiet, grounded knowing that says, I belong here. Not because you let me in, but because I know who I am. That energy, it shifts dynamics before a single word is spoken. And it changes everything in relationship. You see, many women are taught from early on to seek approval, to be chosen, to be liked, to be pleasing. They shrink themselves, soften their boundaries, and compromise piece by piece, thinking it will lead to love. They overextend, overgive, and overstay. And yet the cruel irony is that the more they try to prove their worth, the more invisible they become. The more they chase love, the more love escapes them. But the moment a woman says enough, something remarkable happens. The moment she chooses herself, not from anger, but from clarity, she stops performing. She stops chasing. She stops apologizing for being too much or not enough. She roots herself in her own value. And that right there is when men start to notice. Really notice. Because self-respect is magnetic. It's not just what she says, it's how she moves. She doesn't beg to be understood. She doesn't argue to be heard. She doesn't demand attention. Why? Because her energy no longer revolves around proving herself. It revolves around protecting her peace. And that shift is powerful. It's felt. A man may not fully understand what's different, but he knows something's changed. She's no longer reacting to his inconsistency. She's no longer tolerating crumbs. She's no longer waiting for him to realize her worth, because she already has. There's a purity in that kind of strength. It doesn't push, it doesn't pull, it simply is. And the truth is, most men don't recognize the value of a woman until she shows them that she values herself more than the connection. Not out of ego, out of wisdom, out of experience, out of healing. Because once a woman learns what it costs to stay in a place where she has to convince someone to love her, she'll never pay that price again. And here's what makes that so compelling to a man. When a woman has self-respect, she becomes someone he has to rise to meet. He can't coast. He can't offer the bare minimum. He can't get away with emotional laziness or ambiguity. She's not demanding perfection. She's requiring alignment. And for many men, that's a challenge they didn't expect, but suddenly can't ignore. The moment she stops trying to be chosen and simply chooses herself, she becomes the kind of woman who can't be forgotten, not because of what she did for him, but because of what she did for herself. Her boundaries become the very thing that keep her powerful in his memory. She didn't plead. She didn't break down. She didn't try to make him see what she brought to the table. She was the table, and when it was no longer being treated with care, she left. And that kind of exit, it echoes. Long after she's gone, long after the texts stop, long after he tells himself he's fine. Because deep down, he knows. He didn't lose her because she stopped loving him. He lost her because she started loving herself more. Men are drawn to women who don't make their love dependent on being loved back. It sounds contradictory, but it's true. A woman who can walk away with her head held high, without bitterness, with no need to be validated or avenged, that's a woman who leaves a mark. Because she wasn't trying to win him, she was trying to stay true to herself. And that kind of self-respect, that's unforgettable. It shows him, perhaps for the first time, what real standards look like, not in what she demanded from him, but in what she demanded of herself. She wouldn't stay where she wasn't growing. She wouldn't shrink to fit his comfort zone. She wouldn't betray herself to hold on to someone who only showed up halfway. And once a man experiences that, he remembers it. He may not say it, he may not show it, but he feels it. He feels the absence of a woman who knew her worth and refused to negotiate with it. And no matter who comes after her, no matter how many people fill the space she once occupied, none of them will quite carry that same energy. Because nothing is more attractive than a woman who doesn't just know her value, but lives like it. Let's talk about challenge. Not games, not manipulation, but real, deep, soul-level challenge. The kind that comes from a woman who knows herself so well she refuses to settle for anything less than full presence. You see, men may not say it out loud, but they're wired to chase, wired to strive. They don't fall in love with ease, they fall in love with effort. Especially the kind they have to give. Now, when a woman is always available, always saying yes, always bending and twisting herself to stay close, there's no tension, there's no fire, it becomes routine, predictable, easy. And easy, though it sounds appealing, doesn't ignite a man's instinct to pursue. It puts him to sleep, not because he's cruel or ungrateful, but because there's nothing in that dynamic that calls him forward, nothing that challenges him to grow into more. But the moment a woman steps back, when she stops meeting him halfway just to avoid discomfort, something begins to wake up in him. Her energy shifts from accommodating to sovereign, from passive to powerful. She's no longer trying to be chosen. She's letting him show whether he deserves to stand next to her. And that is the kind of challenge that calls a man into depth. Men may not always understand it, but they feel it. They feel it when they can't predict how she'll respond. They feel it when her eyes don't plead but hold, when she doesn't interrupt his silence with reassurance, when she lets the space speak, when she lets him sit with the consequences of his inconsistency. A woman like that doesn't need to chase because she is the chase, not by playing hard to get, but by being hard to reach emotionally unless it's earned. Her standards are high, not because she's cold, but because she's clear. And clarity is power. There's something primal in a man that activates when he realizes she can walk away and mean it. That she doesn't fear losing him as much as she fears losing herself. That kind of clarity stirs something in him that comfort never could. It's not about cruelty, it's about contrast. A woman who is soft yet strong, kind but not naive, open but not available to just anyone. That's a woman who teaches a man what it means to rise, to earn, to show up. Because she doesn't hand over her affection for free. It's not a coupon, it's a commitment. And only the man willing to meet her there gets the reward of knowing her heart. Challenge creates depth. It creates intention. And intention is what separates a man who shows up for a moment from the one who shows up for the long haul. If everything is given too soon, too easily, he doesn't have to invest. He doesn't have to reflect. But when she steps back, gracefully, without resentment, she forces him to ask himself questions. What am I doing? What do I actually want? Can I match her depth? Can I meet her where she's headed? And that reflection, that discomfort, that is the birthplace of real pursuit. Not because he was manipulated, but because he was moved. Moved by a woman who didn't need him, but chose to open to him. If he showed he was worthy of that opening, men don't resist women who challenge them. They remember them. They dream about them. They measure every future connection against the standard she silently set by walking in her truth. Because she didn't give in. She didn't settle. She didn't become small to make him feel big. She challenged him to rise, not by asking, but by being. That's what love needs, not just chemistry, but courage, not just comfort, but growth. And the women who are brave enough to say, "You'll have to do more than just show up. You'll have to meet me in my strength," are the ones who change the game entirely. Because men may chase pleasure, but they stay for meaning. There comes a moment when a woman no longer seeks closure, no longer looks back, no longer needs to be understood. It's not that she stopped caring, it's that she started healing. And healing doesn't always come with fireworks or grand declarations. Sometimes it looks like silence, like space, like distance, like walking away without the need to explain herself. And in that silence, in that space, she transforms, not for anyone else, but for herself. Men don't forget the woman who walks away and doesn't look back, not because she was dramatic or loud, but because her absence feels final in a way that lingers. She doesn't slam the door, she simply closes it and locks it from the inside. That kind of woman doesn't leave to provoke a reaction. She leaves because she's done reacting. She's done investing her energy into something that drains her more than it fills her, and when she leaves in peace, it creates a disturbance, not in the world around her, but in the man who once held her heart. He may not have noticed when she was trying, when she was patient, when she was forgiving. He may not have appreciated the second chances, or the late-night conversations, or the way she always tried to understand his silence. But he notices now. He notices when her energy is gone, when her attention is no longer on him, when her world no longer includes him in its orbit. That's when it hits. Not because she punished him, but because she stopped participating. And that, for a man, is unforgettable. There's a unique strength in a woman who chooses to heal privately, who doesn't parade her pain or her process, who doesn't seek validation through revenge or rebound. She doesn't need to prove that she's moved on, because she's genuinely doing the work. She's not trying to show him what he lost. She's discovering what she almost lost in herself. When a woman begins to rise from the ashes of a broken connection, she does so with a quiet power. She unlearns the need to be chosen. She releases the belief that love means sacrificing her peace. She starts to see herself not through the eyes of the one who couldn't appreciate her, but through the lens of who she's becoming. And that evolution, that rebirth, is not just inspiring, it's magnetic. Men often realize too late that the woman they thought would always be there has changed, that the door they assumed they could always return to is no longer open. Because the woman who has truly healed doesn't reopen old chapters, not because she's bitter, but because she's beyond them. She's not interested in repeating lessons she's already learned. She no longer fantasizes about what could have been. She's too focused on what can be, what will be. With someone who sees her clearly, someone who meets her with presence, not potential, someone who recognizes her not as someone to fix, but as someone to honor. And for the man she left behind, this realization doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives in the quiet, in the stillness, in those solitary moments when he thinks about what he had and how easily he let it slip through his fingers. Not because she wasn't enough, but because he didn't show up when it counted. He remembers the way she loved, the way she listened, the way she gave chances, the way she stayed when it was hard, and then the way she left when it became too much. That memory doesn't fade, because it was real, because it was rare, because deep down he knows she loved him fully, and she left him fully. Both took strength he may never truly understand. That's the thing about women who break away. They don't just disappear. They evolve. They grow. They bloom in the very silence they once feared. And in doing so, they become the kind of woman who can never again be approached the same way. She's not harder now, just clearer. She's not colder, just wiser. She's not angry, she's free. And the man who once had access to her heart will always feel her absence. Not because she wants him to suffer, but because she finally stopped suffering for him. And that's the kind of goodbye that stays. So in the end, It's not about playing games, withholding love, or becoming someone you're not. It's about reclaiming your center. About knowing that your worth was never meant to be proven, only protected. Because the moment you stop trying to be enough for someone else and start being everything for yourself, that's when they feel it. That's when they realize you were never the one who needed them. They were the one who lost you when you found you. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more videos just like this. Thank you.